Microphone. Okay, with me today is Shawn Arthur, a very prominent researcher in the area of well-being. And Shawn, can you tell us your current title and affiliation?
I'm an associate professor of religion at Appalachian State University, and I focus on Chinese religion and culture.
Very good. Can you tell us what you feel are your main contributions to the field of research and perhaps well-being research?
I think that my biggest contributions at the moment relate to going far beyond the traditional sinological and philological methodologies of studying religion in China to include other kind of cutting edge and groundbreaking research in religious studies and anthropology, as well as the interdisciplinary work bringing in psychology, evolutionary psychology, biology, pharmacology, and such to ask those bigger questions and answer them of why. Why do they do this? Why do they think like this? So.
Very good. Can you are there some findings or programs of research you've looked at that relate to well-being in particular that you can tell us about?
I'm new to the technical terms of well-being and quality of life studies.
Yes.
However, my background is in studying the integration of religion, health, so Chinese medicine, self-cultivation, for achieving the larger goals of well-being in China that the early Taoists and Confucians and Buddhists were particularly interested in.
So, what historical period is this?
My major focus is from about the 2nd century BCE to the 5th or 6th century CE.
Great.
So during the Han Dynasty and the Six Dynasties period, just after that.
Well, what role did you see religion playing in the culture at this time, to the extent that it added meaning or coherence and perhaps greater contentment to the lives of the Chinese?
Yeah, quite interestingly, there was a great deal of folk religion going on at the time, and then a whole range of philosophical positions that were going on at the time, as well the beginning of an interest in longevity and immortality, so the development of the alchemical tradition. And so then, as kind of in the middle of all of that period, institutional, organized, what people call religious Taoism emerged for the very first time, integrating all these various facets, and they provided really a venue for people to develop, to change, to self-cultivate, really to become directedly much more moral individuals, I guess ideally, and connect that to an organized understanding of the larger kind of cosmic realm that include a celestial bureaucracy patterned after the normal, human bureaucracy.
Yes. So it's a real, sounds like a very rich meaning system, wisdom tradition, and especially Taoism, you're saying, had this confluence of factors that it absorbed and integrated.
Exactly.
Any particular insights in terms of practical implications of this for our modern society or how we're living today?
Well, the emphasis in early Taoism has always been on simplicity and quietude, meditation, as well as, interestingly enough, building with the medical tradition, thinking about how one achieves better health through eating properly, exercising properly, reducing stress.
Really? Yes.
Avoiding pollution, things of this nature, which is, that's exactly what the modern, science and modern medicine says the hallmarks of how to bring about health and ensure health. And here we have the exact same thing happening,
Very
2,000
good.
years ago, to 1,700 years ago, and such.
Well, isn't the legend of Lao Tzu that he actually left his work as a civil servant and went into the mountains or something? Wasn't that what part of his solution?
That is part of the legend related to him. That he
So do we need to
left
turn away from society, or not really?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, the reality is, Zhuangzi and Lao Tzu both advocated that getting away from the larger social realm and uninvolvement in lots of things. And it's not really practical, because if we all left our jobs and all went into the mountains, then instead of being in the cities, we'd all be in the mountains.
Okay.
Right? We would have the exact same problems of overcrowding and no resources and all of that kind of thing. However, learning to live a little more gently in the world is one of the things that probably could be used.
And what would that look like in our society today?
A lack of greed, or at least decreasing our greed, decreasing our material concerns and the desires. And of course, the advertising and business world will fight tooth and nail against this.
Yes.
But those would be a couple things that these early Taoists would be interested in. Paying more attention to organic food and sustainable kind of living, living in better harmony with the natural world, rather than only seeing the natural world as something to conquer and something to control. So they said that well-being really comes from a conglomeration of being healthy, feeling good, having good relationships, but then also being a moral person, and that morality helped to maintain a cosmic balance between the heavenly realm and the earthly realm.
Okay.
And they said that humans have a moral obligation to work towards maintaining this larger cosmic balance. And the natural disasters and epidemics and all of that kind of thing happen because people got too greedy, too angry, way over emotional and corrupt and that kind of thing. So trying to avoid those sorts of negative emotions and attachments and greeds and things would be a productive thing for the larger
and
society.
this, and I guess that's from my limited knowledge. This is these are themes also of Buddhism, which is another area of interest for you. But you also find it in Taoism and even Confucianism.
To a large degree, yeah. In fact, some of these early Confucian thinkers, Confucius himself said, we need to be educated. We, need to work towards being virtuous people, because they thought of virtue and well-being as a contagion model, as some of us like to talk about it. That if I get it, right, much like if I got the flu and I sneezed on you, you'd get it, and then you'd share it with everybody walking down the hall that you sneezed by, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, the Confucians and these early Chinese had this somewhat naive but idealistic romantic view of a contagion model. If I'm virtuous, and then the people in my environment will want to be virtuous.
Yes.
If the leader's virtuous, his ministers and assistants will want to be virtuous, and will go on down the line.
Yes.
It starts in the family, it starts at the top, and then, it eventually hits everybody. So even Confucius, though, said that we need to do all of these things, but we also need to be content with poverty. Right? We need to not do them just to achieve material well-being. We need to be content with poverty, being content with low status, and do those other things anyway. Be virtuous and educated and all of that sort of thing. Act properly towards our family and friends and all our relationships, because it's the right thing to do.
And not just for what it will get us. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. So looking at modern society, do you see institutions or wisdom traditions or supports for this kind of virtuous living?
Yeah, in fact, even though Confucianism was outlawed with the invent of the communist leadership in China, that enough people remember Confucianism, that it's been such an ingrained part of how people live their lives and live in families and live in relationships that maintain cogency. Well, even Maoism and as an offshoot of Marxism and socialism is an economic policy. It's not a moral. Right, it's not an ethical issue.
System.
It's not an ethical system. So the Confucian government over the past 10 years or so have actually made strong inroads into reintroducing Confucian social philosophy back into all public schools.
The communist government has done this?
The communist government has done this as a way to rectify the problems they're seeing with the rampant greed and rampant westernization that's happening in China now, because young people who 3 times removed from official Confucian learning, through levels of family and whatnot, they're being raised by people who didn't know anything about it. They who I guess learned it by virtue of their parents and grandparents acted that way. But now that they're being parents, their kids are growing up with just a example set from television and media and movies and Western, literature and all of that kind of thing. So the government says, we need to fix this, right, to get back into that is our core.
Do you see in Western culture a need for some kind of a rebirth in adherence to meaning systems or wisdom traditions or new models? To try to support people and living more simply or virtuous?
That's a tough question, right? I mean, it's a really loaded question because the ultra-conservative movement in this country claims to be focusing on virtue, but it's their very limited notion of virtue as it benefits them rather than benefiting everyone, right? I mean, to claim to be following Jesus' teaching. But then to say that, well, it would be bad to support the poor, it would be horrible to support women, right? It would be horrible to support orphans. I mean, that just goes completely against the whole history of the tradition. So, I mean, maybe better education would help. Following the Confucian tradition, better education about, the ideas and goals of people's own religious traditions and their histories. So, I mean, I think that would be rather important. How would you say it? I guess the religious influence on politics is causing a real problem. Because it's one particular, very limited, small view of religious ideas that are affecting the larger politics. Right? And if we go back to what the Constitution implies and what our early founding fathers were interested in, instead of allowing one religion to dominate and allowing one religion to determine everyone's morals, allowing people to the ability to choose and reminding people that we're founded on the ability to choose. Even if you don't like what I choose, you can't force your thoughts on me, just as I'm not going to force them. Mine on yours, right?
But it can be a source of inspiration, like in the civil rights movement for some people.
I mean, as many problems as religion causes in the world, and I mean, religion itself doesn't do it. It's religious people, right? It's people in the name of religion. It brings about so much hope. And compassion and all these other really positive things in people's lives, in otherwise really horrible, sufferings and horrible situations. It provides some kind of meaning and hope and identity and social connection, which is ultimately a really positive thing, especially for well-being.
Well, the Dalai Lama said in a very unproselytizing way that we need as many religions as we have people. So I guess that'd be like 7 billion or something. So do you support that concept maybe, that people need to find their own meaning system that helps to support their particular personality and lifestyle?
I mean, that would work. That would be helpful. I don't particularly care for the active proselytization because of the problems it brings.
Yeah.
We see this in China, we see it in Africa, we see it in Latin America, all around the world when one tradition comes in with a certain level of power and charisma and whatnot, and really dramatically changes the social system.
Trying to create a theocracy almost? Or?
Right, trying to bring new ideas, say, well, your ideas aren't good enough, you're not even fully human because you don't have the ideas that we have, which are so obvious to us, right?
Okay.
And that, that just erodes and decomposes all of these traditional cultures, which is a shame, right? I mean, because the diversity in the world, that's, thinking about that diversity and examining that diversity brings about a great deal of new knowledge and information and thinking about how to be human and what does well-being mean, and et cetera. And if we go to a single uniformity based on a singular, set of ideas, then we lose all of that.
Yes. Well, and I wonder if there are some possibly transcendent ethical principles that go beyond wisdom traditions, that maybe some common ground can be found, and even humanists and such, will have their ethical systems.
Definitely.
Because when you talk about a virtuous life, I just think that's defining that becomes a challenge.
Well, I mean, especially in China, the whole idea of virtue, and I think virtue more generally, is always defined in terms of relationships. It's impossible to be a virtuous person in a closet all by yourself. Okay. You can think about it a lot. Okay. Right? But if you don't put it into action, that's great. Then you're not virtuous. And, right? If you sit and think about virtue or talk about virtue a lot, but you go outside and you're an asshole, everybody will know you as an asshole, right? They won't think, oh, he's such a virtuous person. No, of course not, right?
So it's inherently interpersal, you're saying?
Definitely, and it's inherent. It's a social issue at its very root, right? So putting those ideal virtues into action, I think is something that would be really important, and not trying to force everyone else to follow your virtue, but if everyone followed their own set of virtues, right, to their best ability, then the place, things would be a lot more harmonious, I imagine.
Yes. Well, and speaking in the area of positive psychology, there is an interest in character, virtue, awareness, and education, but I still wonder if there may be some transcendent virtues people could agree on in terms of being pro-social, not harming other people, like you said, being more gentle with the environment.
Likely so, yeah.
And politics that's perhaps more gentle and even democratic. I mean, there might be some commonality there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if we've trying to help people, not because of it's your best interest, right? Not for money's sake and whatnot, but I mean, being responsible, to taking responsibility for one's own actions. I think that's a really important thing.
And that's
trying to avoid hurting. Those sorts of things.
Great.
I mean, really keeping in mind to work for the betterment of society, which was the whole idea throughout all of Chinese history.
Really?
Right, trying to work for the betterment of society, and then of course all the arguments that what happens when that doesn't work. That's the ideal.
Goes awry.
When do we
how do we correct it?
Right, and how do we ever live up to the ideal, or do we ever as humans live up to the ideal that these traditions set? And I don't think that's necessary.
Well, I think the idea
but moving towards it.
Yes, and having this kind of I would call it an altruistic orientation to a degree, that I'm not just in it for myself, and there's something larger than myself that I'm working towards, and it could be the society as a whole.
Exactly. I mean, and that's the whole point behind Buddhism, right? I mean, especially as it grew from its early conservative state, is to develop some wisdom about the way the world really works, right? To help us all stop suffering, and to develop compassion for your fellow human beings and other sentient beings.
Extend the concept of brotherhood and sisterhood, which I think
right, to other than human people. right?
Yes.
To other than human people, like as Irvin Hollowell, right?
Yes.
Talks about in his, concepts of animism.
Other sentient beings and nature itself,
Yeah,
which I think was
exactly.
and I think it attracted Einstein a little bit too, where he thought that was a good thing, that we saw more other sentient beings as being part of our family, if you will.
Exactly.
Even outside our borders and species.
Exactly. I mean, James Lovelock in the 70s, came up with the Gaia hypothesis.
Yes,
Which is,
yes.
that's exactly it. We're all in an interconnected biosphere.
Yes.
We all have roles and we all have connections. And
Yes.
if people ignore those connections or strain them too much, we wind up getting real imbalance. It's ultimately problematic.
Well, I appreciate your contribution. I'm wondering, is there anything we can do to further the cause of interdisciplinary well-being study that you see?
Involve more people than just sociologists, psychologists, and economics.
Okay.
I mean, more religionists, because I mean, ultimately, if we want to think about what really drives people, and where meaning comes from in their lives, looking only at economic statistics and the kind of general well-being indexes that are out there, very rarely does it talk about the importance of religion in people's lives. And I mean, where I'm at the moment in the hills and mountains of North Carolina, the economic system is poor. That's in rural China, the economic system is bad, right? However, when people can live sustainably and have a strong community, strong family, and then most of them have some kind of strong religious connection, right, to a meaning that transcends them, right, to something greater than themselves. I mean, having more discussion about what religion means by well-being, and how that affects people's immediate lives. I think that would be
well, it sounds like a great idea. And could we include ethicists there too? Is that considered a separate?
I mean, that's different. Yeah, that's the realm more of philosophy.
Okay.
But
there's not a field of practical ethics. It's, okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Welcome. Thank you.